Welcome guys to another episode of Real Talk. Today we're talking about alternative plans. Do you have an alternative plan? A lot of people are talking about Adobe and what software they use to edit and what software they also use to design illustrations with the introduction of the subscription fee, which has been there for quite a long time. It gets a little bit pricey, especially for artists. It got me thinking, all through my career as an artist, I've always thought of alternative plans. I can relate the same story to real life plans. Alternative plans, for example, when I started out as a photographer, I never had the financial capability to buy a proper camera. I went to a second-hand shop. That was my alternative plan. I went to a second-hand shop and then I was able to get a Sigma, SD10 or something, like a Sigma camera. At that time, Sigma was producing cameras. So I was able to get that camera plus a few lenses, and it was to shoot on RAW. There was no JPEG, and you had to get the special software for it to work, for you to get your images, but everything was on RAW, and the LCD screen was quite small. You couldn't see anything. That was my starting point for photography. I could see other people, they'll say, what are you using? Are you using a Canon? Are you using a Nikon? I'll be like, I'm using a Sigma. But I knew that was what I had. That was my plan, that I will start with that, and then slowly I'll be able to grow. Now, when it comes to software, I couldn't afford Adobe, and I never liked the idea of the cracked version. I wanted, if I get Adobe, I want to get my original copy. So the first thing I got was GIMP. I was able to learn how to edit. It's such a nice software to start with, and it taught me a lot as a editor. When I moved to Photoshop and Illustrator and the rest of the other softwares that come with Adobe, I was already fluent. But you see, I never sat and waited for these things to happen. I always said, okay, if I cannot get there this way, what can I use? And I look for that alternative plan. So a lot of times you find people sitting and saying, I cannot do it because I don't have. What is your alternative plan? You're stagnant. You're there. What do you do? What is your alternative plan? Do you go and learn a new skill? Do you learn how to code? Or do you learn how ChatGPT is trendy and my job is talking about it and saying they're going to lay off people? Wouldn't you go there and say, okay, now may I have to learn how to write the prompts properly? I want to learn the inside out of this software. I want to know what goes on behind the scenes, how I can use it, and the alternative softwares that are incorporated with ChatGPT. Then when your company is thinking about it, you're already there saying, I know. So they need you. You become an asset rather than a liability. And the same also when it comes to creativity. What are the alternatives? And I started using Affinity. And for Affinity, you can buy Affinity for illustrations. You can buy for the image editing. The thing with it is you buy it once off. And once you've bought it, that's yours. So you're not paying any monthly fee. You're not doing any cloud computing. You're keeping all your data to yourself. If you haven't tried it out, try it out. And I'm not here to talk against Adobe. They have to do what they're doing. It's just the alternative plans for other people. The people who can afford it, that's fine. If you have the money to do it, if you're working for a company and they're already on the system, you have no other choice. But if you are a small artist trying to grow, I would advise you, instead of getting stuck and saying, I cannot do art, it's expensive, let me jump into Affinity, buy it off once. And once I buy it off once, it makes sense because if you do the math, you can as well buy it off once. Now, when we have talked about editing photos and illustrations, book designs and all that, Affinity has their software. Also, when it comes to video editing, I also chose not to use Premiere because I knew what happens with the lags and the things shutting off. And if you want to render, it's a nightmare. So I wanted something that's fast and quick. I chose to use DaVinci for free software. It's amazing. It blows my mind even up to today. Yes, you can buy it. For example, for me, when I bought it, I had the speed editor. I don't want to edit a project for 2 months. I get very bored. So I wanted to shoot my stuff, edit it, cut it, do this, post it, and something quick and easy to use. I've used Free Pick on the iPhone, and I still use it so I can edit my stuff. And my alternative plan was, should I go Premiere? And I don't want to use Adobe. And once I bought this, I was able to get the software. And with the software, now I can upgrade. So I have a software that I don't have to pay every month. Yet it's top of the range software. If you haven't tried DaVinci, I'm not selling them. Man, it's amazing. And there's a lot to learn. It's one of those expandable softwares. It's once you jump into it, it's like using Ableton. People hate Ableton, but once you jump into it and you start using the Max 8 and you start doing your own, creating your own sounds, and it just goes on and on. It looks boring at the beginning, but it's filled with little nuggets. That was my alternative plan. And the same with life. If you're going through situations or you're in a situation, are you going to just stay there and say, that's it? Or do you have an alternative plan? If things are not working the way you had pictured them, because a lot of times the idea in our head is very beautiful, but to execute it, if you can be able to get to 60 or 70% of the idea in your head, then you're close. But you have to get to somewhere. You have to get to a percentage. Even if you do 5 or 10%, then you're well into the whole action, rather than someone who never did it because they were hell-bent on one plan and never had an alternative plan. When you look at nature and you look at animals and how they mold themselves, and also water, it's not stuck on one direction. It always thinks, what can I do? How can I maneuver around this? You need to be flexible. And if that way does not work, for example, the flowing of the water, then choose another direction.